For 2,000 years, it was just a prophecy. Today, everything is changing. Many believe that the construction of the Third Temple is a major prophetic sign of the end times. But has any progress been made in preparing for the Third Temple? You will be shocked to learn about 10 specific preparations that have already been completed for the Third Temple. By the time we get to number 10, you'll understand why this isn't just a religious story. It's a geopolitical earthquake waiting to happen. The book of Daniel says, "The sanctuary will be cleansed." And that takes on new meaning in our day. Why now? Why in our time? Because prophecies do not depend on human plans. They unfold according to a divine timetable. And what is happening in Jerusalem today can change the course of world history. 2 Thessalonians warns, "Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God." The Antichrist is to sit in the Third Temple. But before he can sit, the temple must be built. And before it can be built, certain conditions must be met. We are almost there. Each of the 10 preparations we will consider brings us closer to the moment when ancient prophecies become modern reality. This is not just a religious ceremony, it is prophecy in motion. What if I told you that 5 perfect red heifers have just been delivered to Israel, and they could be the last piece needed before the Third Temple can be built? You've heard the rumors, you've heard the prophecies, but now it's reality. The Bible speaks of a mysterious ritual that hasn't been performed for nearly 2,000 years. A ritual involving a perfect red heifer, without spot, without blemish, never having worn a yoke. Why? Because only the ashes of a red heifer can purify the Jewish priests before the temple service begins. Without a red heifer, the temple cannot be used. The book of Numbers clearly states, "And he shall take for the unclean ashes of the heifer, which was burned for atonement for sin." In September 2022, 5 red heifers were flown to Israel from Texas. They were carefully selected, checked for blemishes, even checked for 2 non-red hairs that would have disqualified them. When they passed inspection, they were greeted with dancing and celebration, but not the whole world rejoiced. While most ignored the event, those who understand prophecy held their breath. This isn't just a religious ceremony, it's prophecy in motion. The Temple Institute has already announced its intention to hold the red heifer ceremony before Passover this year. It's not next year, it's not someday, it's in a few months. The time frame is as follows. 1 heifer will be chosen for sacrifice. The ceremony will take place outside Jerusalem, probably on the Mount of Olives. The ashes will be mixed, stored, and used to purify the site of the new temple. Then the Third Temple will be ready for construction or dedication. While the world was distracted, master craftsmen in Jerusalem were creating something extraordinary, more than 60 sacred vessels, each made to biblical specifications that had not been in use since 70 AD. But here's what makes this absolutely incredible. I'm going to show you objects that are worth more than most people's homes, made from precious metals and using ancient techniques that took years to perfect. This is the Temple Institute's recreation of a golden menorah, 95 pounds of solid gold. The price tag, $2 million. But here's what's truly amazing. This isn't a replica for display. This is a functional menorah, designed for use in actual temple service. And it's not just the menorah. What you're looking at now represents the largest collection of temple vessels created since the destruction of the Second Temple. Incense vessels designed to burn the exact spices mentioned in Exodus. Measuring cups calibrated to biblical standards. Silver trumpets that could produce the exact tones described in the Book of Numbers. Each item represents months or years of research, craftsmanship, and expense. But here's the question that will shock you. Why spend millions of dollars to create functional temple vessels if you don't plan to use them? Every detail has been examined by archaeologists and biblical scholars. Every metal matches ancient descriptions. Every technology has been recreated according to Talmudic sources. These are not museum pieces. They are working tools for the future of temple service. The Temple Institute has invested decades of work and millions of dollars in these preparations because they believe the day these vessels will be used is approaching faster than the world realizes. What you are watching right now has not been seen for 2,000 years. These are modern Jewish men, descendants of the priestly tribe of Levi, being trained to perform the temple services that their ancestors had not practiced since the Roman destruction of Jerusalem. Imagine this moment. You are witnessing the restoration of knowledge that has been lost for 2,000 years. These men learn rituals that their great-great-great-grandfathers for 70 generations could only dream of performing again. In 2009, the Temple Institute built a field school in Mizpeh, Jericho, about 20 minutes outside of Jerusalem. Here, the Kohanim, the Jewish priests, and Levites undergo rigorous training to ensure that they can perform every aspect of temple service perfectly. In 2015, these students accomplished something extraordinary: the first accurate, authentic reproduction of the Korban Pesach, the Passover offering, in 2,000 years. They learned not only the rituals, but the precise choreography of the temple service. Every movement, every gesture, every word of prayer is reconstructed according to ancient sources. The training includes the slaughter of sacrificial animals, the preparation of sacred oils, the burning of incense, and a complex system of purification rituals. This is not a theoretical education. It is a practical training of people who are preparing to serve in a real temple. The priestly training program proves that preparation for the Third Temple goes far beyond the construction of a building. It is the restoration of a lost religious tradition that can be revived in our generation. What you're looking at right now are not concept drawings. These are operational drawings of the Third Temple, created to modern construction standards and ready for immediate implementation. But here's what makes this absolutely astounding. Not only are the drawings complete, but they've built a scale model that you can visit right now in Jerusalem. This is a 1:150 scale model of the Third Temple, accurate in every detail. The square building is 150 meters long and 150 meters wide, according to the actual plans. The model will be on display in the new Visitors Center opening in Jerusalem in 2025. But here's what most people don't realize. These aren't just religious drawings. These are architectural plans that include modern building codes, electrical systems, plumbing, heating, and ventilation. This is a blueprint for a functioning modern temple. As you walk through this virtual temple, you can see that every detail has been planned. The Sanhedrin chamber, the court of the priests, the altar, the Holy of Holies. Every dimension matches the biblical descriptions exactly. The architects consulted rabbis, archaeologists, and engineers to create plans that combine ancient requirements with modern technology. These drawings represent decades of research and planning. They're ready for use today if political and religious obstacles are removed. What you see right now took more than a decade to create. These are the complete garments of a Jewish high priest, recreated to exact biblical specifications and ready to wear. Think about this moment. These garments represent 2,000 years of hope, dreams, and prayers. Every thread was examined, every gemstone chosen according to ancient texts. This is the breastplate of the high priest with 12 stones, each engraved with the name of one of the 12 tribes of Israel. According to Exodus 28, verses 15 to 21, make a breastplate of judgment of cunning workmanship. Set in it 4 rows of set stones. The 12 stones shall be according to the names of the sons of Israel. Every stone on this breastplate is genuine. We are talking genuine sapphires, genuine emeralds, genuine diamonds. The gold work alone took master craftsmen over 2 years to complete. The ephod is made of blue, purple, and scarlet wool, woven according to ancient techniques. The tunic is made of fine linen, every thread of which meets Talmudic requirements. A turban, a priestly cap with a gold plate engraved with "Holy to the Lord" in Hebrew. A belt woven from 4 types of material, as required by Jewish law. All of these items were not created for a museum, but for use by a real high priest in a real temple. But here's the question that keeps religious leaders awake at night. Who will wear the garments? Because according to biblical law, only one person can serve as high priest at a time. And the process of choosing that person is about to begin. The garments are ready. All that remains is to find a man worthy of wearing them. We stand at the Dead Sea, the lowest point on earth. But what happened here in 2010 will shock you. Representatives of the Temple Institute came to this exact spot to collect what had been waiting here for thousands of years. These are the stones that will form the altar of the third temple. But these aren't just any stones. According to Deuteronomy 27:5, you shall build there an altar to the Lord your God, an altar of stones. You shall not lift up iron upon them. Every stone you see has never touched a metal tool. They were formed by natural geological processes and assembled by hand. According to biblical law, this is the only type of stone that could be used to build the temple. Imagine the moment when these stones were being assembled. Workers stood where Moses himself might have stood, selecting stones according to laws given 3,500 years earlier for a temple that everyone said would never be built. Each stone was carefully examined by rabbis to ensure that it met halakhic requirements. No cracks from metal tools, no traces of human intervention, only the natural beauty of God's creation. These stones are now stored in a special room, awaiting the day when they will be used to build an altar on which sacrifices will resume once again. The gathering of altar stones symbolizes a return to basics, to the times when man worshipped God in simple but sacred ways. These stones connect modern Israel to its ancient past and prophetic future. What you're looking at is a design for the most important room most people have never heard of. It's the assembly hall for the modern Sanhedrin, the supreme religious body that will rule the third temple. But here's what's truly incredible about this design. It's not just theoretical. The Sanhedrin has already been rebuilt. They're meeting right now, and they're actively planning temple operations. Picture this space, a majestic hall reminiscent of the Hall of Hewn Stone from Herod's temple. Circular seats for the 71 members of the Sanhedrin. A central fountain, creating a calm atmosphere for religious discussion. The modern Sanhedrin was re-established in 2004 by a group of rabbis who had received semachah, rabbinical ordination, in an unbroken line going back to Moses. This religious court will rule on all matters related to temple service: who can serve as a priest, how to conduct rituals, when to declare the new moon and leap years. The Sanhedrin is already ruling on religious issues and preparing for its future role in temple service. The hall is designed with both ancient traditions and modern needs in mind. There's a sound system for large gatherings, climate control for the comfort of participants, a library of religious texts for reference purposes. Every detail of the layout is based on the Talmudic descriptions of the ancient Sanhedrin. The restoration of the Sanhedrin and the design of its hall represent the restoration of Jewish religious self-government. This is not just an administrative body. It is the spiritual leadership of the Jewish people, which will play a central role in the functioning of the Third Temple. This is the Temple Institute's Levite choir, performing the exact musical traditions that accompanied temple sacrifices in ancient times. And now, for the first time in 2 millennia, they are being performed again in Jerusalem. Last year, during the midweek of Sukkot, the Levite choir joined dozens of other Levite musicians in a festive performance of Psalm 27 at the southern wall of the Temple Mount. Music was an integral part of the ancient temple service. Psalm 43 says, "Send out thy light and thy truth. Let them lead me, and bring me to thy holy mountain, and to thy tabernacles." The Levites do more than sing. They recreate a sacred musical tradition that was lost nearly 2,000 years ago. Each member of the choir learns not only the melodies, but also the spiritual meaning of each psalm. They learn ancient singing techniques that were passed down from father to son in Levitical families. The instruments are also recreated according to biblical descriptions: 10-string harps, lyres, cymbals, and silver trumpets. The choir performs at various religious events, preparing the Jewish community for the return of temple worship. Their singing creates an atmosphere of holiness and helps people feel connected to the ancient traditions of their ancestors. The Levite choir represents the restoration of not only music, but also the role of the Levites in the religious life of the Jewish people. In the future temple, they will accompany all services with their singing, creating a bridge between the earthly and the heavenly. Their voices will ascend to heaven along with the smoke of sacrifices, as it was in the times of Solomon and Herod. For 2,000 years, no one knew how to produce the exact crimson dye mentioned in the Bible. The secret was lost when the Second Temple was destroyed, but Professor Omar found it. This crimson dye is not just decorative. According to biblical law, it is to be used in the high priest's robes, the massive curtain separating the Holy of Holies from the holy place, and as an essential ingredient in a mixture combined with the ashes of a red heifer. Watch this process. These worm eggs, processed according to ancient techniques that Professor Amar reconstructed from fragmentary historical sources, produce the exact shade of crimson described in Exodus. Think about this moment. A color that disappeared from the world 2,000 years ago, restored in our generation. Professor Zohar Amar of Bar-Ilan University has spent years researching ancient texts, archaeological finds, and natural history to identify the exact insects used to produce the biblical crimson dye. The process is incredibly complex, requiring precise timing of collection, special processing conditions, and ancient color extraction techniques. This dye not only matches ancient descriptions, it surpasses modern synthetic dyes in durability and beauty. The crimson color obtained from these worms has a depth and richness that cannot be reproduced by artificial means. It is the same color that adorned the tabernacle of Moses and the Temple of Solomon. The rediscovery of the crimson dye completes another element in the preparation for the third temple. Now the high priest's garments can be dyed in the exact colors required by the Torah. The curtain of the Holy of Holies can be woven from the correct materials and dyed in the correct colors. Every detail of the ancient temple service can be reconstructed with historical accuracy. For decades after 1967, only a handful of Jews ascended the Temple Mount, and they were not allowed to pray. Today, tens of thousands of Jews ascend the Temple Mount each year. They are now allowed to pray openly, sing, and prostrate themselves in worship. The road to full Jewish freedom of access and worship on the Temple Mount remains long. But according to Temple Mount activists, it is clearly unstoppable. The political atmosphere around the Temple Mount has changed significantly in recent years. More and more Israeli politicians are openly supporting Jewish rights at the holy site. Movements to build a third temple are gaining support among religious and even some secular Israelis. International support is also growing. Christian Zionists around the world see the rebuilding of the temple as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. They fund research, support temple preparatory organizations, and lobby their governments to support Israel's rights to the Temple Mount. The younger generation of Israelis is more open to the idea of a third temple than their parents. Educational programs in religious schools include studying temple service. Army rabbis give lectures on the significance of the Temple Mount. Public opinion is gradually changing. But the most important change is occurring on a spiritual level. More and more Jews are beginning to see themselves not as a people in exile, but as a people returning home. The psychological shift from diaspora thinking to temple thinking creates the basis for political action. When a people is spiritually ready, political opportunity follows. So, here's where we are right now. The 4 red heifers are qualified and in the right age window. All the temple vessels are complete. The priests are trained. The plans are ready. Political support is growing. But there's one question keeping intelligence agencies around the world awake at night. When will the ceremony actually happen? And what will the world look like when it does? If everything is ready, the plans, the priests, the utensils, even the red-headed heifer, then why hasn't the third temple been built yet? There are powerful forces standing in the way. Some political, some religious, some spiritual, and until they are removed, the prophecy can't move forward. Or can it? To understand the complexity of the situation, we need to take an honest look at the obstacles. These are not just technical problems that can be solved by engineering. They are fundamental conflicts between different religious traditions, political systems, and spiritual forces. Each obstacle represents a multi-layered problem that requires not only human solutions, but also perhaps divine intervention. Understanding these obstacles will help us see why the construction of the third temple remains one of the most complex issues in the modern world. These obstacles are not accidental. They are part of a prophetic plan that unfolds according to divine timing. Every delay, every difficulty can serve a purpose in the larger picture of redemption. Let's start with the biggest barrier of all, the Dome of the Rock. It's one of the holiest sites in Islam. It sits right on the Temple Mount, on the very spot where the first and second temples once stood. And right now, no Jewish construction is allowed there. Any attempt to build a temple would spark a global explosion of protests, violence, and possibly war. Muslims believe the Temple Mount is theirs. Jews believe it is theirs. And the rest of the world is too afraid to touch it. The Dome of the Rock was built in 691 CE on top of the ruins of the Jewish temple. That's over 1,300 years ago, and it has never been torn down or moved since. Until this obstacle is removed, the third temple cannot rise. But prophecy says it will rise. So what happens to the dome? Something must fall for something else to rise. There are various theories about how this problem might be solved. Some suggest an earthquake that would destroy the structure. Others talk about a possible agreement that would allow Jews to build near Islamic holy sites. Still others believe that only supernatural intervention could change the status quo. Archaeological research shows that the Temple Mount is large enough to accommodate both Islamic shrines and a Jewish temple. Some rabbis claim that the exact location of the ancient temple is north of the Dome of the Rock. If so, it would theoretically be possible to build without demolishing existing structures. But even this possibility would cause massive protests in the Muslim world. For most Muslims, any Jewish construction on the Temple Mount is unacceptable. They view the entire area as an Islamic sanctuary, where non-Muslim religious construction is a desecration. The international community also opposes any change to the status quo. The United Nations regularly passes resolutions condemning Israeli actions on the Temple Mount. The European Union and most countries in the world support maintaining the current situation, where Muslims control the religious aspects and Israel provides security. But prophecy does not ask permission from the international community, and history shows that God can change political realities overnight. The second barrier is politics. Right now, the idea of rebuilding the temple is a political nightmare. Israel is surrounded by enemies. Every decision is under global scrutiny. If the Israeli government even proposed rebuilding the temple, the United Nations would condemn it. The Arab world would rise up, and nations would threaten war. That's why most leaders remain silent. They delay, they avoid, they sidestep, because they know that one wrong move could cause global chaos. But what if that chaos is part of the plan? What if the prophecy doesn't expect peace, but rather a crisis? Politics can slow it down, but they won't stop it, because the prophecy doesn't ask for permission. There are already Jewish politicians in the Israeli Knesset who publicly support the rebuilding of the temple. They are not loud, but they are not retreating either. The Jewish Power Party openly advocates for Jewish sovereignty over the Temple Mount. MK Itamar Ben-Gvir regularly climbs the Temple Mount and calls for the construction of the temple. The growing influence of religious parties in Israeli politics is changing the dynamics of the debate. What was a marginal position just 10 years ago is now being debated in parliament. Young politicians from the religious Zionist camp are less inclined to avoid the topic for fear of international backlash. American political support is also evolving. Evangelical Christians, who make up a significant portion of the Republican Party's electorate, are strong supporters of the Third Temple idea. They see it as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy and the approach of the second coming of Christ. But even this growing support faces strong opposition. The State Department has traditionally opposed any changes to the Temple Mount. Israel's European allies have warned of the catastrophic consequences of any move in that direction. The pressure is enormous, but it is not stopping the movement. Here's what few people are talking about. Many Jewish people disagree with rebuilding the temple. Some are ultra-Orthodox, some are secular. Some fear it will provoke a war. Others believe only the Messiah should rebuild it. Even religious leaders are divided. Some say the time is now. Others say it's too dangerous. This internal conflict is one of the most silent but powerful barriers, because without unity, there can be no movement. The enemy loves division because divided people cannot build holy things. But one event, one breakthrough, can unite them all in an instant. What could suddenly change Jewish minds and unite their wills? Ultra-Orthodox Jews generally oppose active efforts to build the temple. They believe that the temple should be built only after the coming of the Messiah and not by human efforts. This position is based on Talmudic tradition, which warns against forcing the Messianic times. Secular Jews are mostly indifferent or even hostile to the idea of a temple. They see it as a threat to the democratic character of Israel and a danger of theocratization of the state. Many secular Israelis are more concerned with economic and social issues than with religious projects. Even among religious Zionists, there is disagreement. Some rabbis believe that the current generation is not spiritually prepared enough to restore the temple service. They point to the lack of true repentance and spiritual renewal as an obstacle to building the temple. Other religious leaders argue that it is the construction of the temple that will lead to spiritual awakening. They see the temple as a means, not an end, a tool to bring the Jewish people closer to God. These disagreements create a paralyzing uncertainty in the religious community. But history shows that moments of crisis can instantly unite a divided people. An external threat, a great miracle, or a charismatic leader can overcome internal divisions. Such a moment may be approaching. Here's the truth. The Third Temple doesn't just affect Israel. It affects all three major religions: Judaism, Islam, and yes, even Christianity. For Muslims, it's a threat. For Jews, it's a promise. For Christians, it's a sign. And that makes the temple one of the most controversial topics in the world. Religious leaders from every tradition are watching, because they know that if the temple rises, it will change everything. Revelation 11:1 says, "And I was given a reed like a rod, and I was told, 'Rise up and measure the temple of God.'" Some Islamic scholars already fear that the red heifers brought to Israel are a signal that Jews are preparing for temple sacrifices. The temple is more than a building. It is a battleground of faith. When religion clashes with prophecy, there is no neutral ground. The Islamic world views any plans to build a Jewish temple as a direct attack on its holiest sites. Al-Aqsa and the Dome of the Rock are the third holiest sites in Islam after Mecca and Medina. Muslim leaders have warned of a religious war if Jews try to change the status quo on the Temple Mount. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which represents 57 Muslim countries, regularly condemns even Jewish prayers on the Temple Mount as a provocation. The Christian world is also divided on this issue. Evangelical Protestants generally support the rebuilding of the temple, seeing it as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. They believe that the temple must be built before the second coming of Christ, and that it is a Christian duty to support Israel in this. The Catholic Church and most Orthodox churches take a more cautious stance. They acknowledge the importance of Jerusalem for all three monotheistic religions and call for the status quo to be maintained. The Vatican has repeatedly expressed concern about any action that might upset the interreligious balance in Jerusalem. Global religious tensions create an atmosphere in which any move to build a temple could trigger an international religious crisis. But prophecies do not avoid conflicts, they predict them. The fifth and final barrier is spiritual warfare, because the temple is not just a religious building. It is the place where God once dwelt, and Satan wants no part of that. The enemy knows the Bible. He knows the prophecies, and he knows that when the temple is rebuilt, Jesus will return. That's why this battle is more than political, more than religious. It's a battle in the heavenly realms. Ephesians 6:12 says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual wickedness in the heavenly places." Before heaven touches earth, hell will throw in everything it has. Could the spiritual opposition we see now be the final delay before the temple is raised? First comes resistance, then comes movement, then comes the temple. And once that happens, the countdown begins. The spiritual warfare around the third temple manifests itself in various forms: unexplained failures at critical moments, sudden changes in the political situation, divisions among the temple supporters. All of these can be manifestations of spiritual resistance. Many religious leaders speak of the need for spiritual preparation before building the temple. They call for repentance, prayer, and spiritual purification of the Jewish people. Some see the current obstacles as a call to deeper spiritual work, but spiritual warfare has two sides. If the dark forces resist the construction of the temple, then the forces of light must support it. Prayer movements around the world pray for the restoration of the temple. Christian and Jewish groups organize special prayer meetings to support this goal. Prophetic voices in various religious traditions speak of a coming time when spiritual obstacles will be supernaturally removed. They predict a sudden breakthrough that will open the way for the building of the temple. Understanding the spiritual dimension of this issue helps explain why progress often seems slow and why obstacles seem so persistent. This is not just a human endeavor. It is a spiritual battle for the future of humanity. Let us imagine the future. The dome is removed or bypassed. A political deal opens the door. The Jewish people are united. Global religion is defeated, and the enemy is driven back. Then the temple begins to rise, stone by stone. The priests are called, the sacrifices are resumed, and the world watches in awe or fear. Because when the temple returns, conflict returns, but so does the king. The temple may begin with celebration, but it ends with confrontation. Imagine the day the first red heifer is sacrificed outside Jerusalem. The world's media will broadcast an event not seen for 2,000 years. The ashes will be collected, mixed with water, and used to cleanse the temple site. Within months or even weeks, construction will begin. The stones that have been waiting in storage will be transported to the Temple Mount. The sacred vessels, created at a cost of millions of dollars, will be installed in their designated places. Trained priests will don their white robes and enter the holy place. The high priest, chosen after much debate and prayer, will don a breastplate studded with 12 precious stones. The Levitical choir will take their positions and begin singing psalms that have not been heard in the temple for 2,000 years. Silver trumpets will announce the beginning of a new era in Jewish history. But this will not be just a Jewish event. Christians around the world will see it as a sign of the coming second coming. Some will rejoice, others will be afraid. The Muslim world will react with anger and perhaps violence. The international community will panic, unsure how to respond to an event that changes the entire religious landscape. Daily sacrifices will resume for the first time in nearly 2,000 years. Smoke will rise from the altar every morning and every evening. Pilgrims will come from all over the world to see the rebuilt temple. Jerusalem will become the center of world attention as never before. But prophecies warn that this period will be short. The Antichrist will come and desecrate the temple by setting up his image in it. This event, known as the Abomination of Desolation, will be the signal for the Great Tribulation described in the book of Revelation. After 3.5 years of desecration, the true King will come. Jesus Christ will return to the Mount of Olives, as the prophet Zechariah predicted. He will cleanse the temple, defeat the Antichrist, and establish his 1,000-year kingdom. Then the temple will become what it was always intended to be, a house of prayer for all nations. We are living in prophetic times. The 10 preparations are almost complete. The 5 obstacles are easing. The time is approaching faster than the world thinks. The question is not whether the third temple will be built, but whether we are prepared for what comes after.